This morning, to some degree, this narrative may seem out of place. It probably seems like a Resurrection Sunday service, not necessarily a Palm Sunday service. Normally, preachers will focus on, Good Friday and the themes of the crucifixion necessarily. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on the resurrection, and next week, I'm probably not even going to refer to the resurrection necessarily in the sermon. It's just this way that I had this planned out, and so we're going to go with it. The Lord does things for a reason. I believe that with all my heart. So the question is before you this morning. We're in this series called Questions Jesus Asked. Who are you looking for? Who are you looking for? When I lived in Florida, we lived in Florida for about 9 years. After I grew up in northern Kentucky, went to Dallas for a couple of years for Bible school, met my wife, got married, moved to Florida. We were in Florida for about 9 years. And so when we were there, we were young, we had just been married, and we wanted to experience all that life had to offer, especially the Florida experience, which is its own culture in its own right. And so there was lots of water sports. We fished, we swam, we went to the trips to the, crystal clear water, headwaters of Rainbow River and different clear springs and things like that. But one of the things that I wanted to do is when we went down on the Dunedin Causeway there's a place called Hobie Beach. And so a Hobie catamaran is a wet bottom boat. It has a trampoline in the middle of it is what they call it, and 2 little hulls and a giant sail. And so I'm like, I want to do that. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I grew up in northern Kentucky, okay? There's not a whole lot of sailboats in the area, okay? And so no clue about sailing, no idea what to do. But it's unfathomable for me for some reason to buy anything nice. So I bought 2 junky boats and put them together into one boat. And then we went out on the beach and we decided that we were going to sail. And I just read some online articles, and Google taught me how to sail, basically, in a lot of ways, right? And then talked to some people who were sailors. We went out on the beach, we shoved off from the shore, and we were sailing. Now, sailing is particular, anybody that likes to boat, is that it's just you, the wind, your rudders, and that's it, the water. I mean, there's nothing else there. It's just... There's no motor sounds. It's just you're gliding through the water by wind power. It's pretty surreal in a lot of ways for me. Now, I loved sailing because it's work. I mean, from the beginning of putting up the mast and rigging the sail, rigging the boat, it's all work. And I like to think methodically about it. And one of the most relaxing things to me was like charting our course to go somewhere. So our often traveled place was Anclote Island. It was about 3 miles out to shore, and then you were 12 miles straight north. And so when you could sail there, you had to have the right wind. If you have a northern wind, you can't sail directly into the wind. You go backwards, okay? And so you have to sail different angles. It's called tacking. You go back and forth until you finally meet your destination. The better the wind, the faster you can go. You can actually sail, believe it or not, faster than the wind speed, which is extremely exciting. And so we were on the midst of this, always going to Anclote Island. And so there was one caveat that was a beautiful thing about navigating to Anclote Island. On that island was a lighthouse. And you could see it from 12 miles away. And that lighthouse was kind of like your saving navigation grace, because you knew basically or roughly what channels you should cross and how far from which island you should go past it. But if you could always look up and see the vision of the future ahead of you, if you could look up and spot that lighthouse, you knew that you were going in the right direction. That's what it was about. As long as you could keep your boat pointed in the correct direction towards the lighthouse, then you knew that you would eventually arrive in the place that you were going. So the opening scene of this particular chapter in John 20, this is exactly what's going on. Mary has her life pointed in the direction of Jesus. She gets up early in the morning. It was just after the Sabbath on Saturday, so she couldn't go out. But Sunday morning, the Sabbath had ended when the sunrise had happened. And so she goes out and she's looking for Jesus so that she could prepare his body according to the Jewish traditions with spices and oil. So now we enter into the text in verse 11 of John chapter 20. Would you read with me? I'll read from the New Revised Standard Version this morning. It says this: "But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she bent over and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" I ask my kids this all the time. I don't know if you parents, I'm like, why are you crying? Tears must be a fundamental part of the human experience, no doubt. She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. Verse 15. And she said to her, he said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Here's the scripture, the question this morning. Who are you looking for? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Verse 16, Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Now maybe it's fundamental to human life in many ways, but every once in a while we experience this phenomena that happens to us. We go to the pantry one evening and we're looking for a snack, you know what I mean? And you look into the pantry and there's all the normal snacks, or maybe it's the refrigerator for you. There's all the normal things. You're like, man, I've had that last night. I've had this in the past or whatever. And you start digging around in the pantry, and back in there you got that one special snack that you didn't realize was in there, right? You go looking for something good and suddenly you find something better that was hidden behind all the other stuff. This is exactly what is happening to Mary. She goes looking for Jesus, and he's a dead man. She goes looking for a dead man, and she finds the resurrected Lord Jesus Christ. She finds something better. And I'm convinced that if we continue seeking Jesus in our lives, that we'll find things that are way better than the things that we thought we could seek on our own apart from him. You want wealth? You want happiness, provision? I guarantee you can find all of that, and it's going to be way better in Jesus if you seek him first. Some of you, this happened to you last fall when you got out your winter coats. Anybody ever go rummaging through your winter coats as you get them out in the fall, and you find like a $20 bill tucked away in one of your coats, and you're like, man, this is a great surprise. You weren't anticipating that. You just wanted your warm coat, but you found a $20 bill inside. Somehow, I think that Mary has come upon such an instance when she's arrived at the tomb looking for a lifeless body. But yet she finds something very much better that morning. Now, this question, I think at first glance, doesn't have a whole lot of significance to us. But when you look at it deeply in the backdrop of it in the book of John, John asks this question over and over again. In John 1:38, Jesus asked the disciples as they were coming to him. He hasn't even called them necessarily yet to be his disciples. And he says, "What are you looking for?" In the Greek, it's almost the same exact language that Jesus used when he was talking to Mary. Who are you looking for? What are you looking for? I think this is what Jesus genuinely wants to know, what you are looking for in life. This is the exact question. John, the book of John displays for us that people are constantly searching for something, seeking something. People seek cars, houses, sex, power, money, identity, purpose, wealth. They even seek themselves in many ways. Then inevitably, after you obtain what you're looking for, there's this emptiness that you feel at the end of the day after you've gotten what you desired. Somehow, I think our minds are replete on the fact that we are seeking something, but then we obtain it, and then there's this emptiness inside. Anybody ever feel this way when you build up a restaurant in your mind or something like that? Like, I'm going to dinner this Friday night, and this is going to be great. I'm going to get that one meal that I love so much. You build it all up in your mind. You fasted all morning, you know what I mean, to have that meal that night. You go there, you eat it, and you're like, oh, that's not as good as I thought it was going to be. Maybe the chef is different. Maybe the microwave was too hot. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, something just wasn't right about it. And then inevitably, if that wasn't it, if maybe it satiated you for that moment, 2 hours later, I can guarantee you something. You were hungry again. And that same meal that you just ate isn't going to satisfy you like it did 2 hours ago. I think this is God speaking to us, that satisfaction is so absolutely otherworldly that you only have figments of it here. You have little glimpses of satisfaction, but you don't really experience the fullness of it. What are you looking for? Who are you looking for? And so I think if we're going to understand the depth of this, if I'm going to pull out the mirror again this morning, then when Jesus asked this question, who are you looking for? What are you looking for? That this question and what you seek reveals who you are. It reveals something deeply about yourself. And I think that's the fundamental issue of this whole thing. You sort of are revealed by the things that you seek in life. Every person, I believe, is seeking something. Every person, alive or dead, was intentional in their lives about seeking something in life. Even if you said that you weren't seeking anything in life, your life still pointed in a certain direction. Let me show you what I mean by this. There is an ancient religion in the world called Buddhism. And Buddhism has basically as its fundamental facts these 4 tenets, if you will. And they are this, that you need to ultimately rid yourself of all desire. Now, this is an interesting sort of ideology here. The 4 tenets are this, so that you can ultimately reach the position called nirvana, which is the absence of all desire. Okay? And so the first one is this, that everything in life is suffering. The second is this, is that all suffering comes from desire. So number 3 is naturally, if you're going to try to rid yourself of all suffering, is that you rid yourself of all desire, then you will ultimately rid yourself of all suffering. And number 4 is that you take the 8 steps, 8-fold path to elimination of all desire. Now, the problem with this is that the entire religion is absolutely dysfunctional. It's defunct in every way. And because of this, because if you are trying to rid yourself of all desire, and you're seeking to do that or looking to do that, then basically the fundamental tenet of Buddhism is that you are seeking to rid yourself of all desire by seeking to rid yourself of all desire. Does that make sense? Like you're in a circle there, basically. I seek to rid myself of all desire by seeking to rid myself of all desire. I can eliminate it by eliminating desire. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Every single person in life is looking for something. Even if you're not trying to look for something, all of nothing is something. And so in life, you're going to pursue something, whatever it may be. So my solution to that is that you pursue Jesus and you'll have everything you really wanted in the first place. And Jesus hits the nail on the head when he asks the question, what are you looking for? Not what are you looking for, but who are you looking for? I believe this is the case for every single person in history. Some great thinker said this. He said, the man that's knocking on the door of the brothel is knocking for God. The man that stares into the drink at the bar is staring and looking for God. That in everything that we seek, we are somehow seeking the source of it, even though we want the peripheral things on the edges. I remember a time when I was in elementary school, and my gym teacher, I think he just ran out of things to do that day with a bunch of elementary school kids, and he said, all right, let's play Follow the Leader. And so he just duped us into walking in circles around the gym, like to exercise or whatever. So we were playing Follow the Leader, and somehow he convinced us. He said, listen, whoever follows me the closest to me, said they will be able to get some type of prize or something like that. Well, I'm like, this is easy. You know, I can follow him as absolutely close as I possibly can. And so I did. I mean, I was right up behind the Joker. And he said, whenever he stops, the person that's closest to him will get some type of prize. So I was right behind him. But I was watching his feet and not watching like the mass of his body. And so when he went to stop, I ran right into the back of him, fell down and hurt my knee. And I remember like crying in the bleachers because it hurt my knee so bad on that hard gym floor. I was in elementary school, you know. And then I remember him yelling at me basically because he said, I was following him too closely. That's what he said. I'm like, well, why were we playing this game? You know, it didn't make sense to me. You know, Jesus is not going to yell at you for following him too closely. That's exactly what he wants. He wants you to be close to him. He wants you to follow him in everything that he does. He wants you to do in the same way. You know, when my kids want to be with me, most of them run up to me, grab onto my legs. You know what I mean? Like the full body grab. You know what I mean? Wrap their legs around me, their arms around me, and they won't let go because they want to go everywhere that Daddy goes. And the only way to ensure that is they wrap them whole selves around me so that they can follow me wherever I go. That is exactly what Christianity is. That you would wrap your entire life around Jesus so that wherever Jesus goes, wherever the Spirit of God leads, you will go too. That's the fullness of what it means to be a Christian. So what are you seeking? Who are you looking for? This past Christmas, we went down to Texas to my wife's family, and we were in Fort Worth. We stayed with my brother and sister-in-law. And while we were there, it rained one day. And so I can't sit still when I'm on vacation. I want to be doing something all the time. And so we went to Cabela's. And Cabela's is bigger in Texas, if you did wonder that. And we went to Cabela's. We spent like several hours there, bought some stuff, and then we were on our way home. And we got stuck in this middle of this crazy rainstorm. I mean, it was a rainstorm like I've never experienced before. Absolute just whiteout conditions. Worse than any snowstorm I've been in where you're driving down the road and you can't see hardly anything in front of you. It was worse than that. And I remember being on the interstate, coming home from that Cabela's, back to my brother-in-law's house, in this whiteout conditions, not being able to see anything at all. And I knew that if I stopped, and some people did, they stopped like right in the middle of the interstate, which you'd never do, by the way. All right, I used to drive back and forth on I-4 in Florida. If you learn anything from driving on I-4, it's this: don't stop, ever. I don't care what's going on. Don't stop on the interstate because you will cause a massive pileup, if anybody remember that from several years back. And so, I knew I didn't want to stop. There were people off the side of the roads who were dodging people left and right, people turning on their flashers and blinking their lights and things like that. But there was this one guy in a truck in front of me. And he seemed to know where he was going. And I could just barely see his taillights in those whiteout rain conditions. And so I thought, you know what? This guy seems like he knows where he's going. I'm going to follow him as best as I possibly can. And I didn't know where I was going necessarily. I had a GPS up, but, it was still hard to discern where you were at or where the exits were. And so we were following that guy as close as he could. And somehow my trust began to grow in him that every intersection or every exit or every light, I knew that if this guy really knew where he was going and I continued to follow him, watching him closely, that I would get somewhere close to the destination that I was going to. And every intersection we went through, I'm like, man, this looks a little bit more familiar. This seems right. This is roughly the area that I should be in. And the truth is that following Jesus is no different. If you follow Jesus in every intersection or crossroads of your life, little by little, your faith builds in Him. Your trust builds in Jesus. And ultimately, you will get to the place that you're going, but you're following the right person. It's not even necessarily about the roadway itself. It's about following the right guy. And if you follow that right person, let me just let you in on a clue of the Gospels and what the Gospels are about. And then Paul's exegesis of all the Gospels and the following pastoral epistles and things like that. Listen, Jesus knows what He's doing. Jesus knows how to get through life well. Jesus knows how to stay on the right path. And if you want your life to be anywhere successful or desire to go the right pathway, then follow Jesus because He knows what He's going. And that's this idea of followership, or where we are going, where we are looking. That's why this question right here is fundamental to your human existence. Do you want to go somewhere? Do you want to accomplish something? Not by the world's standards, but by Jesus' standards, by the standards that really matter. This is the way to go. What happens, I think, is that before long you begin to not metaphorically look at it like you're following somebody in a car, but maybe better metaphor is that you're dancing. This has historically been used by theologians for many years, that the Godhead actually dances together. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit are in this kind of eternal dance and communication with one another. In the same way is that when God invites us into this Godhead dance, now we're dancing intimately with Jesus, like kind of cheek to cheek with Jesus. Now, personally for me, when I think about that, I remember Andy Griffith. Anybody ever remember the show, the episode particularly? It was called The Convicts, I think. And so Andy Griffith, of course, is with Barney, and Barney gets in trouble. And Barney and Floyd get kidnapped by 3 women state prisoners that have escaped. And they're being held hostage in a little cabin out in the woods because they were out fishing and they ran out of gas. They get captured. And so these convicts are out there. They're holding hostage Barney and Floyd. And Andy, of course, shows up, and he's there to save the day. He captures 2 of the women outside the cabin, and the other lady is none the wiser at that point in time. However, she's like the boss. She's the big one, okay? They call her Big Maud, okay, for a reason. And she's a big girl, and she's strong, and obviously can overpower Barney, and she's got a gun. And so Barney thinks of this ingenious solution, and he puts on some music, and he looks at her and he says, "Let's you and me dance," right? And so he begins dancing with Big Maud, right? And she's got a pistol in her hand, and he's hoping that he can open up the door and lead Big Maud outside in this intimate dance back and forth across the living room there in that one-room cabin. And as she ultimately goes out the door, Andy can capture her and subdue her. However, in the midst of this, Barney wants to lead the dance. And so he looks at her and he says, "Now stop. Stop fighting it. Let me lead you to the land of rhythm and pleasure," is what he said. And so she submits, and he begins to lead the dance back and forth. Ultimately, he gets her outside. They capture. Barney gets freed. You know how the story goes. But I think this is exactly what Jesus wants in your life. Stop trying to lead the dance. Stop fighting Jesus. Is there somebody in here this morning that you feel like you're just warring against life and the world itself? Stop. Just give it up and let Jesus lead you. You want me to sing a country song, "Jesus Take the Wheel" or something like that? How can I convey it any better? Stop fighting him. And everything that you desired in life, all the rhythm, all the pleasure in life will be fulfilled as you seek Jesus first. Find the source, and you will experience all the peripheral things that come from the source in itself. And so what happens is when we let Jesus lead and we let Jesus take over our lives, is our pursuits for beauty and pleasure and, become not the objects themselves as our pursuit, but the source of the beauty and pleasure becomes the object of our pursuit. If you're looking for wealth and providence, it becomes looking for the great provider himself. And he'll offer you riches beyond your mind's conception. Please, when you think of wealth, because this is one of the world's greatest pursuits, I think. What's the big 3? Sex, money, and power. Usually, wealth. That's the predominant one, I feel like. And if you, for some reason, think and want to define wealth by the world's standards, I think you have just shortchanged yourself totally. There's so much more things in life. I mean, the marrow, the goodness of life, the wealth of life. Like my 4 children growing up and serving God all the days of their life. Now that's wealth. My children growing up, right? And my retirement can be I can live with each of them for 3 months of the year or something like that. That's wealth. That's true wealth. You know what I'm saying? They can take care of me when I'm old. It was normal in Hebrew society. It should be normal in my society, right? What about the fact that when I go home at night and I lay my head on the pillow, that I sleep good? I didn't even know there was a storm last night. Somebody said there was a storm. I slept extremely well through the night. Maybe when you go home, your relationship with your wife is good. And there's no tensions. There's no hardships. There's no problems. Now that, to me, you can have all the money in the world. You can have all the riches and the treasures of gold and silver, cars and houses. I'd rather have that. I'd rather have that. And so somehow in our pursuit of the truth, it becomes the pursuit of the one who is truth. So Mary already knows this. I mean, this isn't news to her, I don't think, in any way. The direction of her life has always been pointing towards Jesus since she was saved, since she followed Jesus in the first place. And that's why she's seeking him even after he's dead. Notice that Mary is the only one there. Isn't that interesting? First of all, in Hebrew society, that the testimony of Jesus being raised from the dead came from a woman. It doesn't happen in first century society, okay? And then the fact that she comes alone. It's powerful. It's powerful there. But she arrives and she thinks that she cannot find him. So she begins to weep naturally. And now she doesn't know where to go. Of course, you're seeking someone and he's gone. So what do? Now there's this beautiful contrast here that we've already kind of mentioned. Is that Mary comes looking for a dead man and finds the living God. It's a beautiful thought. Not only this, that Jesus speaks her name. This is powerful here. Jesus speaks her name outside the tomb. And now there is this realization that not only is Mary seeking Jesus, but Jesus is seeking Mary too. Wow! Now that's powerful. Even death cannot stop Jesus from seeking you. All right? No drug addiction, no blinding of faith, no world asset, and no person can stop the pursuit of Jesus in your life. He is constantly and consistently calling out your name over and over again. He's calling you right now. Just like he called Mary, he's calling you. He's saying Lindsay and Mike and Shauna and Mike. Ryan, he's calling out your name right now, asking you to come. I feel like this must be said, and this is going to be an interesting kind of metaphor to use, but does anybody remember the movie? I won't tell anybody that you raised your hand, but anybody remember the movie? I think it was actually a series called Weekend at Bernie's, right? Everybody remember that particular movie? I remember it maybe from the 90s or something like that. It was a long time ago. You know, following Jesus in Christianity is not Weekend at Bernie's, okay? We're not propping up a dead man by our faith, hoping to achieve some of wealth by our own ends, okay? That's not what it's about. If you know the story, basically, the CEO who's involved with the mob and whatnot, and he's going to have these two guys off at his beach place on the weekend. And so what happens is that he dies, just out of the middle of nowhere. I don't know what happened exactly, but he dies. And these two guys try to pretend that he's alive the entire weekend. That's not what Christianity is. Jesus isn't dead. He's alive. Okay? We're not following a dead guy. We're not propping him up by our faith. That's not what Christianity is. The good news of the resurrection is that Jesus is alive right now, and that he's speaking to us, he's talking to us, and that we have a real relationship with him. We are not seeking a dead teacher from long ago, or a principle, or a relic from the past. We are not propping up a dead man by our faith to achieve our own ends. We are in a real relationship with the God of the universe. Let me finish by saying this. I don't think there's any better, personally. And when I still look at it, I'm just dumbfounded by the possibility of what's happening right now in my family's life. Let me come down here and tell you. The last 30 days of my family's life has been absolutely crazy. It really has. And there's no better illustration or metaphor for what I'm going to say than this. We found a place. We've been looking off and on for a house and some land for the kids to kind of spread out in. And we tried to discern that if it was the Lord's will that we move downtown in Frankfurt into a marginalized area to better reach people and be incarnational. And every single time we tried, the door shut in our face. I mean, not like just shut, but like slammed. More or less. We put offers on, I believe, 4 different homes in urban environments in Frankfurt, in marginalized areas, and every single time the door shut. I mean, real offers, like signed papers and stuff like that. Every time it's shut. Head contractors come and look at the houses and say, hey, is this fixable? Can we live in this with a family of 4 people or 6 people, 4 kids? Every time. We find this place finally out in the country, out in Lawrenceburg. And so what happens is we put an offer on it, and they accepted it. We're like, this doesn't happen to us. You know what I mean? We've been rejected so many times. I can't believe this happened. And so they accepted our offer. It seemed like it was a little bit below market value. We had 5 acres, and we thought this could be the right thing. And so it happened. We had a contract on it. I went down to the deed office to kind of search the deed out and look about it. And sure enough, if the bank that had repossessed the house and bought the house back at the courthouse steps didn't pay $10,000 more than we paid for it. You know, like, Lord, are you speaking to me? You know, is this what I'm looking for? Is this what we've been looking for? So it goes on, and, you know, I figure we're going to need substantial cash to be able to renovate this house and get it to where we could live in it, basically. And so, you know, for me, that means just sell something in my life. It's been predominant in my life. I've had over probably 50 vehicles in my life, and I'm 34. So it comes and it goes, you know. The Lord sends you a cow, don't forget to milk it before you send it on his way, okay? There's deep theology right there. And so what happens is that I put up the minivan for sale, a small compact tractor that I had for sale. I put up my boat for sale. Now, you talk about sacrifice, folks. That's sacrifice, okay? I put it all up for sale. Within 6 days, I had over $21,000 in cash in my hand. Lord, are you speaking to me? Are you saying something to me? So, all right, Lord, if this is you, we got one other thing you got to do for us, right? You need to sell our house in Frankfurt. Highlands Drive. 24 hours after putting the house on the market, the sign went in the yard. We had 3 offers on it over asking price. Lord, is this you? You know what I mean? Like, come on. Doesn't it seem like the Lord's led us in this direction? I'm asking you to discern that. I already know. You cannot convince me that the Lord hasn't led us in this direction. So we own this house already. And within 30 days, or maybe less than that, we won't have a mortgage. We won't have a debt to our name whatsoever. That was my goal by age 50. I'm 34. What are the next 16 years going to be like? You know what I'm saying? Like, if God can do that, what can He do for the future? What are you looking for? The better question is, who are you looking for? I know what I've been looking for, and I know that this scripture well, that He is able to exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or desire. He can fulfill it. You cannot convince me by any means that God has not literally provided for us to move or make this move. But maybe that's not the most profound thing here. I think there's really something deeper than that. Maybe it's the content of what God is speaking to you is really peripheral. Let me show you what I mean by that. Maybe it's the fact that God is actually speaking to you right now. That's the most important thing. Maybe it's not about the content necessarily. Maybe it's more about the fact that the God of the universe is speaking to me individually in my life and affects everything about me and my children. That God is so near, that He's so big, that He's so close, that He cares where I live. That He cares about every debt that I've owed. Not just my sin, but my actual debt too. Enough to release me from it. Isn't that powerful? That there is a God out there who is speaking to you. Now listen, let me give you this caveat. Jesus did not come down and wake me up and back up in the middle of the night and appear to me and say, Scott, I need you to get up. You know, He did this in the Old Testament, right? Get up, Abraham, and move to the country out of Ur. Leave your father and mother and your land and your family and your heritage and go to the land of Canaan that I will show you. The Lord did not say, Scott, get up and move to a muddy, long gravel driveway in Lawrenceburg in a trailer house with 5 acres. The Lord didn't say that to me. But I can tell you that He's spoken to us along the way. And what we have discerned is that God is speaking. And maybe it's not so much about what I hear from God, but the fact that I am hearing from God right now. Listen, Jesus wants to know you. Jesus wants to hear from you. Jesus is looking for you. Jesus is calling your name right now. He is concerned what you're looking for. He's concerned more about who you are looking for.